That's actually what the love bombing is meant for as well, is to collect information, because during love bombing, they're just listening to everything. They're such good listeners and they want to know everything about you. But it's also so that they can employ those insecurities at times where they're just trying to help you improve or be a better version of yourself, or don't you love me? Those kind of acts.
Welcome to Girl Talk with Melissa Ann, and today I have some wonderful guests. I have a trauma coach as well as a trauma therapist with me today. Both are familiar faces that have been on the podcast. But today we're going to talk about a really serious topic. I think from my lens, I've seen a lot of, I don't know if I want to call it just I want to say horseplay, but it isn't horseplay, but people not being serious enough about what I'm seeing as far as domestic violence. It is almost like it is a thing that's been being normalized. And I wanted to have this conversation today with these two young ladies just to help us understand, okay, A, it is not normal. B, what are some of the triggers, and some of the things that you can do to get out of a situation or not even get into situation to begin with. And so this, while this is not my wheelhouse, I've never been in that type of situation. I've watched it. My mother was, and we could talk about that as you know as we go through the podcast. But first, I want you two to introduce yourselves briefly. I know everyone, if they're following us, they've seen you both before. But briefly introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, and we can kick it off with some questions.
I'm Dr. Kelley. I've had the honor of talking to Melissa before on Girl Talk, and I'm a local to Raleigh, trauma-focused therapist, yoga teacher, meditation teacher, author, podcaster, professor. Basically, I'm just obsessed with self-help.
Superwoman.
Yes. No, 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 not superwoman. I wasn't saying that. No, I'm really passionate about anything dealing with mental health and empowerment. Like, that's a big part for me, is that these conversations should be meant to empower and inform. And so that's why I love that we're having this conversation today. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about your book as well. And Miss Anissa.
Hello, people. I am back. Thank you for having me again, Melissa. Yes, I am a trauma coach, and I've been a trauma coach for about 8 years now. I am just as a passionate, or I want to say more passionate than Dr. Kelley when it comes to working with women in particular. I do work with men, but I am passionate about bringing more awareness within the Black community to the importance of understanding generational trauma and how to move past it, because we have to understand that our experiences are in direct correlation to the decisions that we're making as adults, and we have to stop that cycle of abuse at some point in time. So yes, I am passionate about that. I am a obviously a coach and a published author as well, and I just love working with people.
Awesome. Well, let's dig right in. So, from your lens, I'm sure that you guys are work with women or even men that have been in a DV situation. What do you find are some of the misconceptions of surrounding domestic violence?
So, as far as one of the biggest misconceptions that I can gather would be that it's easy to leave and that people should just do it. I think that understanding the addictive nature of a domestic violent or the addictive nature of an abusive relationship. And what I mean by that is that our brain becomes normalized to this intermittent reward that can happen when you go through the cycle of abuse. So you have this mounting tension, and then a situation arises, whether it be physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and then there's this resolving and then the repair. And the repair is so incredibly affirming for the brain. The amount of dopamine that is released during repair is enough to keep people bonded. And so these trauma bonds can
Wow.
happen, and it's almost like a slot machine where we get more of that reward from not knowing when we're going to get the positive outcome we want. And so there's an actual addictive nature to these trauma bonds. That's not even to say the whole practicality of finances, power, safety, children, access to services. So we've got these two things at play with not having enough supports for people to leave and then not respecting the addictive nature that these relationships can have.
And I see where, it's like anything else when you say addiction, right? Anything else, alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, whatever it is, that's it's sex, that's addicting. But what I can't seem to wrap my hands around, or my the thought process around, is the why, a man or a woman feels like they have the right to, lay hands on someone
Hmm.
in any given situation. I was, many, many years ago, I was at a hotel, and I could hear someone being
Mm,
abused, and I called security. But
good.
security, they wouldn't knock on the door. They wouldn't go in. They're just, standing there listening. I'm like, well, aren't you going to do something?
Mm-hmm.
And, and they didn't. And it was just, it bothered me because I could
Yeah.
hear the stress or the distress in that young woman. So what is it that, what's the why behind it?
I think from what I've experienced with some of my clients is that they typically have come from an environment or a past where they've seen it before. And it
Mm-hmm.
becomes part of, I don't want to say acceptable, but it becomes, for lack of a better word, the norm of what they've seen growing up. So they think that those struggles or those bouts of violence are acceptable. And then they take it a step further and think that that's the blueprint for future relationships because they think that's a sign of love, that's a sign of attention. And that in that way that abuse becomes normalized, and to a certain extent what I've seen in my experience is when women get away from that environment and then they meet someone who is not like that, that attraction to that other individual is not as strong because they're not displaying those type of habits and behaviors that they've been used to all their lives.
I would agree absolutely with what Anissa is saying, and it has to do also with our nervous systems. Where if you are, it's in my first book, What I Wish I Knew, I talked about the frog, how they, I don't know if anyone knows how they kill frogs, but if you throw a frog into a boiling pot, it jumps right out. But if you put a frog in tepid water and slowly raise the temperature, it doesn't know what's happening. And that's how they successfully, killed frog. And it's kind of a similar thing with our nervous system. If abuse or behaviors that are harmful are so outside the norm, as you're saying, Anissa, something that you didn't grow up around or that you weren't normalized to, it's shocking to your system and you notice it and this is not okay. But if it's something that your nervous system has become acclimated to, those same bells and whistles are not going to go off as soon as they should. And that's where the trauma bond can come in and get someone into that cognitive dissonance where you have morally one thought, I'm a strong woman or I'm a strong man and I deserve to be treated well, but then your feelings are, but how do I leave this person? It's so hard.
What are some of the, like, and I don't say men or women because I know it's both, right? So how do they get women, or how do they get their victim pulled in? Like, they're not, automatically starting at that level. How do they get them pulled in?
Well, it normally starts very subtle, and it kind of escalates from there. So it might be a simple disagreement. Let's just say she puts on an outfit that he may find too revealing or too sexy, right? And it will start off with a very strong urging of to take those clothes off because of the attention, the outside attention that you're going to get. And then it'll build from there to now becoming more intense and more angry and more aggressive. And then that particular aggressive will then start picking apart their victim per se, and everything will be scrutinized and under the magnifying glass.
Both of you made such a good point too about the kind of gradual increase, and I think one of the things too to consider is the mechanism of love bombing, that it serves a purpose for bonding. And love bombing, for your listeners, probably heard this term before, but essentially it's this influx of adoration, and it could look like gift giving, it can look like lots of attention. And what happens in these situations is that you become hooked on the other person much quicker than maybe the relationship warrants.
Mm.
And so when there's these gradual pullbacks of love and you want to work to get it back, that's when that cycle of abuse starts. And those, as Anissa was saying, it's almost like an experimentation at first. If it's someone who's a narcissist or who's abusive, they're going to see what they can get away with.
I was gonna
And
say they test the waters.
absolutely.
That is sick. Like you testing the waters to see, okay, is she actually the type of person that I can get away with? If not, I don't want to deal with that person. I'll
Well,
go
think
on to
about
the
it like
next person.
fishing. Think about like going fishing, right? You cast your reel out. You put your bait on, but and you're sitting there and nothing's biting. So what are you going to obviously do? You're going to move to another spot. So that's what they tend to do. They move around until they find that spot, that perfect storm of a woman who is already struggling with her own self value, her self worth, and they monopolize on it because in their own way they feel like they're doing you a service by correcting
Mhm.
your wrongs or by bringing forth things that you need to do to be better at or do differently.
You bring up such a good point too about they will use, and that's actually what the love bombing is meant for as well, is to collect information. Because during love bombing, they're just listening to everything. They're such good listeners and they want to know everything about you. But it's also so that they can employ those insecurities at times where they're just trying to help you improve or be a better version of yourself, or don't you love me? Those kind of acts. So you bring up a really good point with that. And I want to reiterate one thing, because we've been talking about women as opposed to men. Research shows that men are equally abused emotionally. So I want to make
Yes. Mm-hmm.
sure that we're clear that the stats are pretty equal between genders. Now, physical abuse and sexual abuse does err about a third more towards women, which makes a lot of unfortunate sense. But that being said, that fishing portion, I know you asked us, like, how do we keep this from happening? I always encourage people to lean into disagreeability. The more holistically disagreeable you are because you are being your authentic self, the less likely the hook is going to catch you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Double click there. What are some of the steps on how to be a disagreeable person? And I'm asking this because, A, I understand that men are probably in this pool of individuals too, but this podcast is Girl Talk. So we're
Yeah.
focused on the women, unfortunately. Sorry, men. But the, understanding, like, how do you be disagreeable? Because in society, let's be honest, women are kind of, they want a mate and there's not a large pool. And so being disagreeable doesn't make you someone that is attractive.
Well, that's the fine line with dating. You're already, when you're meeting someone for the first time, you're already sending your representative anyway, because you
Yes.
got your walls up and you're going to let your wall down a little bit at a time. But instead of being purposely disagreeable, make sure that that your opinion is valued. And that
Hmm.
is going to obviously, hopefully, if you're in tune with yourself. Now, if you're coming from a perspective of a woman who has had abuse in the past or have other feelings of low self-esteem or insecurities, then she's naturally going to veer in the direction of trying to be a pleaser because she's trying to, in this case, hook that man. But I'm all for being authentic and not purposely disagreeable, but understanding that what you say does have value and go into it with confidence that, I can take this or I can leave this. I'm bringing just as much to the plate as he may be bringing to the plate. So we got to figure out how, because we're both 50-50 in this, how this relationship is going to be beneficial for both of us and not just one or the other.
I love the way you put that, because I think when I bring up disagreeability with some folks, they think it means just being difficult, but it doesn't. It means listening to your authentic voice and making sure that's the voice that's speaking.
Yes.
So not the impersonator.
No.
Or the representative.
Or the representative. And understand you're not always, I always say I'm not everyone's cup of tea.
Oh,
And they're not
yes,
my
that's
cup
like
of
my
tea.
favorite. Mhm.
So, and that's
Mhm.
okay. So we have to get to a point, especially women, where we're just not collecting bodies, meaning we're just not meeting these random men and everyone we see, we're destined to be in this forever after relationship with them, right? And just take things for what they worth. Take face value for what it is. And I don't like to use the word
Mhm.
red flags because it's probably overused. But when you see those signs that, he said something that I didn't like, or he did something that doesn't feel good to me, you got to recognize that and be prepared to run. Don't always be on this
Mhm.
tip of wanting to constantly compromise with people who aren't doing the same for you.
I think that's
Agreed.
a valid response as well, because we ignore red flags because we want to say, I can change him.
Or we want a man.
Yeah, we want a man, but I can fix that. You
Yeah,
know, he yelled at me on the first date. He was
that's
just
okay.
agitated. Yeah, he was just
Yeah.
We don't
agitated.
want to think that way, though.
Right.
That's dangerous for sure.
I can know for me personally, with my trauma, I had a string of bad relationships. And what I
Mm.
found was that, crazy enough, I tended to always go into it where I want to fix them. I want to make them better. And I was putting up with a whole
Mm.
bunch of shit that was never meant to be a part of my story. But because of my
Mhm.
trauma and I didn't want anyone to feel what I felt, I overcompensated in my relationships by giving too much of Anissa and
Mm.
ignoring the telltale signs that this might not be the guy for you. So I would make
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
excuses, like you said, if he
Mhm.
yelled at me, or if he was, maybe grabbed my arm a little tighter than what I would be comfortable with. Well, he had a bad day at work, or money is tight, or all these different scenarios that he didn't even have to give me an excuse. I gave him excuse off the jump, because I wanted
Mm.
to fix it.
I think too. I don't know, and I'll go back to what my original statement is, and I'll caveat it with this. Like, my mother was a product of domestic violence. I saw a few fights, but my siblings had the brunt of it. But she told me that when she got married, her mother told her she went home to her mother because my dad was hitting her. And her mother was like, "That's what men do. Go back home."
Oh gosh.
So, that was probably in the 40s, right?
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, it probably was normal back then that women had to be
Mhm.
subservient. But I'm seeing a shift now where it just
Mhm.
seems like these men think it's okay to put hands on somebody's child. Like, and it is bothering
Mm.
me. So what do
Mhm.
you guys think the shift is?
So you're asking if instead of having hands on partners, it's hands on
No,
children?
no,
Is
no.
that what
I'm
you're saying?
saying
It's starting younger.
you're hitting a woman that's somebody's baby. You know what I'm saying? That, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. um, well, I mean, I don't know if it's shifting towards it being okay. I think that in my opinion, I think it's being highlighted more.
Okay.
I think something that was happening behind closed doors
Mm.
is coming out behind those doors a little bit more, and more people. I mean, I think about the Me Too movement, for instance. More people are saying, guess what? This has been happening all along, and we've been ignoring it.
I'm gonna go in a different direction, only because
Please.
this is what I'm seeing now. Because I have two daughters that are teenagers, or in high school, and I'm seeing firsthand, as what you were referring to, Melissa. This, I don't know if the word shift is the right word, where everything now is happening earlier than what we grew up seeing. So, for example, now you have high school boys that will physically abuse their girlfriends, verbally abuse
Mm.
their girlfriends. And what I've seen is the correlation with the cultural differences, and believe it or not, social media is a huge one, and music. I know no one wants to
Mm.
talk about music, and but especially in the Black community, music plays a huge role in our children's lives and how they respond or lack thereof to situations that are happening. And what they're seeing now on social media platforms like TikTok, like Instagram, that this stuff is to a certain extent glamorized on both ends, not just
Mm.
the man abusing the woman or the boy abusing the girl, but vice versa. And it becomes this kind of almost laughable thing that this is just what it's supposed to be like. This is just how it is. And it's part of relationships and love.
Dr. Kelley, as we round out the conversation, and then I'll give you an opportunity to, Anissa, but what are you from utilizing your book? Talk a little bit about your book as it references domestic violence, but what message would you give to those who are silently suffering from domestic violence?
So, the book that you and I first spoke about was The Gaslighting Recovery for Women,
Yeah.
but I actually kind of want to highlight my first book even more
Yeah,
so
that's the
for the
one I'm talking
conversation
about. Uh-huh.
today. Yeah, because so What I Wish I Knew Surviving and Thriving After an Abusive Relationship was co authored with a survivor of DV who was in a very violent, dangerous relationship. And she got out and is thriving today. But one of the biggest things that happened in her story that is the most terrifying is that she attempted to leave by herself without backup and without a safety plan put in place. And it resulted in a violent outcome. And if she could have had people having these kind of conversations, and she had thought to herself, maybe I do need to talk to a support person, and it's okay. I don't need to carry the shame around this relationship. I have a right for support. And that on the converse, if you're having someone come to you and they're telling you they're in this kind of relationship, please do not judge them. Please do not shame them, and be holistically there for them so that when they are ready to leave, because if they tell you they're in this kind of relationship, they might not be ready to leave right away. And pressuring them and shaming them is not going to make them leave sooner. But letting them know, I am here when you are ready, no matter what, is very important. And if she had even just had the cops go with her or her cousin that she had spoken about in the book, I don't think it would have resulted in her almost being strangled to death, which is what happened. And so the biggest thing is know that a safety plan, which I have available on my website and it's available in the book, a safety plan is crucial. If you don't have a therapist, you can go through it with a pastor, a spiritual leader, a family member that you feel trusting to talk to, or even sitting down with yourself and doing it. But ideally, support and reducing the shame around having these conversations and not pointing fingers.
Absolutely. Anything you want to add, Anissa?
No, I think Dr. Kelly hit it. I mean, when you're ready to make that move, it's this most scariest thing that you can ever even imagine, because
Mm-hmm.
one, you already have this induced fear of leaving, right? Even though you know the situation is not conducive to your life, you still have this tug of war with your heart with this person that you're in love with for whatever reason. So when you make that move, you've got to be really clear that you're ready to go. And the safety plan is number one. You got to have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I say all the time, pray and pack. You got to get
That's
out
a
of
good way to
there.
put it.
Yeah, but you
Yeah.
gotta have a plan. If you don't have a plan,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time you're gonna fail, because now you're just, you have this argument and now you just throwing stuff in a bag and you're ready to go and you have no idea where you're going, who you're going with, even if you have the financial means. Because most of the time, what I'm seeing with some of the people that I work with is that the person that they've invested all this time with is also controlling the finances. So you don't
Mm.
have the capabilities to just jump in your car and move to another state or grab the kids and go. It's a little more complicated than that. So you've got to first get to that point where you're done, when you really feel like your safety, your life, lives of your children, if that's the case, is at risk. And then you got to start in the on the back end generating your plan.
Yeah, pack and pray. I like
Yeah,
it.
I think too, like, I just want to clarify again, I haven't been in this situation, but you're saying make sure your finances, but I would think that if you would want your safety over the finances piece, like you could
Well,
figure out if
you can't have one without the other, or you're gonna be back, or you're gonna end
Hmm.
up back in that same
but
situation you
aren't
just
there
left.
resources like you could go to shelters, etc., that'll help you?
I had a woman that she was aware of all of that. She did not feel comfortable enough, especially with her children.
Hmm.
Even though, of course, here in Atlanta we have shelters that are designated just for women and children. But what
Hmm.
when her and I were creating the safety plan, what she was finding out was that they didn't have any space. They were
Hmm.
already at capacity, and she was in a state where
Right.
she had absolutely no family. So she had no one really to lean on to say, okay, me and the kids are going to go stay with you for a little while. So she had to get a plan in place to get out of the state, because where she was living, there wasn't an option. And you just don't want to just pack and go to a shelter, because sometimes you're introducing a whole other set of problems that you're
Okay.
not
And
ready for.
Okay.
I very much agree with Anissa because financial abuse is one of the most impactful to make someone feel a lack of safety, because it's not just what am I going to do this week or this month when I get out, it's but what am I going to do in the long run.
Yeah.
So if you're in a relationship and the person you're with is not empowering you to have your own account or to have your own financial freedom, and they're making all the decisions, it might look like they're trying to just be helpful, but if it also aligns with other potentially abusive behaviors, that's a red flag. And it's not always conducive. You could have someone who even has a beloved pet that they don't feel like they want to leave because they're afraid that their abuser is going to kill their pet, honestly. And so there are agencies that will help individuals get out with their pets, even. So there's so many factors at play with leaving that I completely agree that having, I mean, even thinking about like a go bag is what it's often called, and just having that at the ready. And that includes things like knowing what to do financially.
Okay.
It's unfortunate, but it's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I've had an awesome time talking to you two. I've learned a ton. I think this is an important topic. I'd love to double click on it on a larger scale, so maybe we could talk about it at another time. But I do want to make sure that everyone that is listening today understands A, how to get in contact with you, and any books that you have that will help these women or even men. We'll give you that today, men. You know, be better themselves and empower themselves. So the last few 2 minutes we have, so I'll give each of you a minute.
Well, as you know, I do have a ebook called "The Faces of Trauma," and a lot of time I did that with the emphasis of people don't recognize what trauma is. They think that it only relates to sexual abuse, but trauma could be difficulty with infertility, as you were speaking of, Dr. Kelley. So it is a gamut of things, and people have to understand that trauma looks different for everyone. So what may be traumatizing for me may not hit your Richter scale of trauma for Melissa or Dr. Kelley. So I have that book, and I also have fiction books that where I took characters with trauma to give you the details of how that looks, and of course ultimately the outcome of how they got over it. And that book is called Invisible Lives, and the third book is called Chasing Happily Ever After. You can go to my website, which is blendedlikeuscoaching.com, and those books are available either on Barnes and Noble or on Amazon.
Very good. All right, Dr.
Mhm.
Kelley, 1 minute.
Okay, so I've got a couple books, but the two that apply today, We've got the What I Wish I Knew, Surviving and Thriving After an Abusive Relationship. It's available wherever books are sold. And it just came out on Audible a couple months ago. So it's
Congrats.
actually myself and Kendall Ann reading. And I was so proud of her for doing this because it was not easy. I mean, she really struggled getting through retelling her story, and the emotion of it is in her voice. And so if you really want the impact, but also the ability to listen to a story that if you're in this situation, you might not feel safe carrying a book around that shows what you're reading about, having it virtual or on Kindle, which it's also available, can be a good resource. And then the other one is right up here if people are watching, Gaslighting Recovery for Women. And I am so proud of this book. I'm just thrilled with the people that have been helped by it. And it doesn't just talk about abusive relationships and how to get out of a gaslighting relationship that is romantic or interpersonal, but I also cover things like societal gaslighting, medical gaslighting, structural gaslighting. So, kind of like, what is it? How do you identify it? How do you thrive after? And then you can find me on my website, ameliakelley.com. That's Kelley with an EY. And I'm pretty active. I would say my Instagram is where I'm absolutely the most active. And then my podcast, The Sensitivity Doctors, which I would love to chat with you ladies on, actually. So we'll have to chat about that after this.
Yes, love to. Okay. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. We hope that you've gotten something out of it. And if you are in a situation where you are being abused, please make sure that you're getting help. But I think the after effect is once you've gotten out of it, we didn't talk about it, is you definitely need therapy, right? Or a coach to get you back healthy again. And so you have two ladies here who can help you do that. But first and foremost, let's get you out of any situation that you may be in. As always, I see you because I am you.